Hello everyone, and we have the speaker now, Mr. Calum Chace, and he is going to present about the title Artificial Intelligence and How True Singular It Is. Mr. Calum Chace is a best-selling writer and sought-after speaker on artificial intelligence. He focuses on the medium and long-term impact of artificial intelligence on all of us, our societies, and our economics. His non-fiction books on AI are The Economic Singularity about the prospect of widespread technological unemployment and Surviving AI about strong AI and super intelligence. He also wrote Pandora's Brain, a techno-thriller about the first super intelligence. Before becoming a full-time writer and speaker, Kalam had a 30-year career in journalism and business, in which he was a marketer, a strategy consultant, and a CEO. A long time ago, he studied philosophy at Oxford University, where he discovered that the science fiction had been reading since boyhood was actually philosophy in fancy dresses. To make their lives easier, marketers have depended on tools and technologies to automate their work and reduce manual effort for a while. Yet, there has always been a gap in terms of effort and quantifiable results. Intuition on the right audience and time to send messages are not enough to answer a digital marketer's basic question. This is where AI comes in. Using artificial intelligence in digital marketing cannot only help answers these questions. In some cases, it already is. This gives back marketers time to innovate and grow their brand rather than worry about how to automate emails to millions of customers at a time. So it is all about artificial intelligence and how true singular it is. And we have Mr. Calum Chace, writer and speaker, with us. Mr. Calum Chace, the platform is all yours.
Okay. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, wherever you are. I don't know where you all are. I believe I have 30 minutes to talk to you about the medium and long-term impact of AI on all of us, on societies and economies. So if you were hoping that I was going to talk to you about the application of AI to marketing right now, I'm afraid not. You might want to go and make a cup of tea. So I want to start by congratulating you, because you have all chosen to be born at the most interesting and the most important time in human history. And that is because this is the century of the two singularities, and I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes describing what I mean by that. Now, hopefully, if I do this, hooray! Hopefully that has taken all of you, along with me, to the next slide, which shows that I'm going to talk about these two different singularities. The blue circle is for the technological singularity, which I wrote about in a book called Surviving AI, and that is superintelligence. The pink circle is the economic singularity, and that is about automation. So that is our subject for today. And if we manage the transition through and beyond these two singularities, our world will be truly wonderful, because our technology, and therefore us, we're on an exponential growth curve. You hear the word exponential used a lot. A lot of the people who use the word don't really understand what it means, so I'll talk about that a bit. We won't get the wonderful world. That seems to be continuing. Unless we rise to the challenges that these singularities present, and so I'm going to talk about that. This word singularity has a dubious or a patchy intellectual history. It comes from maths and physics, where it means a point in a process where a variable becomes infinite. And the classic example is a black hole. At the center of a black hole, the gravitational field is infinite. And applied to technology and sociology, economics, it means a point when you get the biggest possible change, bigger than the revolution, bigger than just disruption. And the normal rules break down. We need a new set of rules. And it's very, very hard to see beyond the singularity because of the event horizon. So it's very hard to forecast the future past the singularity. The technology that is driving all of this is, of course, artificial intelligence, which is all over the media in the last 3 or 4 years. It's a bit of an overnight sensation, but it's been 62 years in the making. It was founded as a science back in 1956 by these gentlemen at the Dartmouth Conference in New Hampshire. This is them celebrating the 50th anniversary of that conference. Sadly, they were unable to celebrate the 60th anniversary 2 years ago because they've all succumbed to a bug in human software known as death. And we'll come back to that. We know artificial intelligence is our most powerful technology because it has beaten us in 4 games which we think are very difficult. Back in 1997, an IBM system called Deep Blue beat the world's best ever human player of chess called Garry Kasparov. 14 years later, another IBM system called Watson beat the best players of a TV quiz show called Jeopardy. And the loser then, Ken Jennings, put up a sign on his podium there saying, "I for one welcome our new robot overlords." Then in 2016, an AI system built by a company called DeepMind in North London, very impressive company, 400 PhDs in North London, owned by Google. They created a system called AlphaGo, which beat the best human player of Go, a man called Lee Sedol. Very important moment that, particularly for China. The game of Go is very popular in China, and this was a Sputnik moment for China. They woke up to the power of AI and started to take it very seriously. And then last year, a system developed in Carnegie Mellon University in North America beat some of the world's best players of poker. Now, those last 2 games are different from the first 2 because in 2012, there was a big bang in AI. Jeff Hinton, a British computer scientist who spent most of his career in North America, now works for Google, worked out how to apply a branch of statistics called machine learning, and in particular deep learning, to artificial intelligence. Up until that point, AI had not really worked in the sense that it didn't make money, and now it makes a lot of money. For example, it's allowed Google and Facebook to take over most of the advertising industry. We now have machines which are, in some respects, like human brains. They learn and they are creative, but they are narrow. They are artificial narrow intelligences. So they are machines that can play the very perfect chess move while they're in a building which is burning down to the ground. They're very, very good at one thing and absolutely rubbish at everything else. But they are very impressive. There are machines now which can recognize faces better than you can. They are overtaking us in speech recognition and catching up fast in natural language progression. And these developments are happening faster than people expected. But they're not easy. You need very powerful machines, you need lakes of data, and you need very smart people to wrangle the algorithm. So they are being used very effectively by the tech giants, but they're only just starting to enter the rest of the business world. So the joke in Silicon Valley is that machine learning is like teenage sex. Everybody talks about it, but very few people actually do it. What's made all this possible is primarily the enormous growth in the power of our computers. So you all know, I'm sure, that you carry a supercomputer around in your pocket. The smartphone in your pocket has more compute power than NASA had when they sent Neil Armstrong to the moon. In fact, a top-end toaster now has more compute power than NASA had when they sent Neil Armstrong to the moon, which means Neil Armstrong was a very brave man. We also have exponential growth in the volume of data that we have. IBM likes to say that 90% of all the data that we have, 90% of all the information that humanity has, was created in the last 2 years. And that will also be true next year, and it will also be true the year after. So in the next few years, some very interesting things are going to happen. First of all, your smartphone is going to get sexy, and that's a smartphone being sexy. At the moment, Siri and Cortana and Alexa and whatever Google's calling theirs today are a bit of a joke. You can ask them one question and they'll give you a sensible answer. If you ask them a follow-up question, they generally have no idea what you're talking about. And that will change in the next 5 to 10 years, probably 5. In fact, Google Duplex, which many of you will have seen, shows how quickly that is changing. You will have conversations with your smartphone and you'll send it off to do errands for you in the digital world. The other thing that's coming along relatively soon and will have a huge impact is self-driving vehicles. We don't know when these will be ready for prime time. They have to be infinitesimally low risk to release them, but they're getting close. Google has a program whereby non-Google employees, members of the public, can sign up to a service in Arizona and they can get rides in self-driving taxis. The customers sit in the back and there is nobody in the front. So we're getting quite close. And when they are ready, they will be a really good thing, because at the moment humans kill 1.2 million people every year because we're not very good at driving cars. We're sending humans to do a machine's job. So the sooner we can introduce these things, the better, because there's a holocaust going on out there and we should stop it as soon as we can. Because of these enormously important opportunities, there is a tidal wave of money going into artificial intelligence. These 6 tech giants are now AI giants. Google always was, and the rest have become AI giants. And together they spend more on R&D than the UK does. That's all the UK's companies, universities, all government departments and agencies. And in fact, Amazon on its own spends half as much on R&D as the UK does. And these companies spend an awful lot of their R&D on AI, which is not true of the UK. China also has AI giants. Baidu is their Google, Alibaba is their Amazon, and Tencent is Facebook Plus. But in China, unlike in the US, the government is also spending very heavily on AI. The UK got quite excited recently when they announced £1 billion planned expenditure on AI over the next few years. A calculation was done recently that the Chinese government, local and central government, is planning to spend $429 billion in that time. So here's a list of all the UK's and Europe's tech giants and AI giants, and this is also true for the rest of the world apart from the US and China. And this is a problem. I really don't think that it's wise for the rest of the world to allow our most powerful technology to be developed overwhelmingly in the US and China. So I talked about a couple of things that are going to happen in the relatively near term, but we are really just at the beginning of the AI story. And that's because of this exponential growth path that we're on. The law, which is the name for the exponential growth path of computers, is Moore's law, because Gordon Moore, one of the co-founders of Intel, noticed it back in 1965 that the company he was working for then was putting twice as many transistors on a chip each year. And the law has evolved, and some people will tell you it's dying or dead. That's not true. The underlying observation, because it's not a law of nature, it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy, but the underlying observation that machines are getting twice as powerful every 18 months has certainly got 10 years to go and probably quite a lot longer. So that gives us exponential growth, which looks like this. This is a chart of the number of transistors on Intel chips over the years. Exponential growth is phenomenally powerful. We don't normally see it in the world, even though actually each of us is a product of it. Each of us is the product of our cells dividing over and over again about 40, 42, 43 times. But as an illustration of how powerful exponential growth is, if you walk 30 steps, you'll travel about 30 meters. If you could walk 30 exponential steps, your first step would be 1 meter, your second would be 2, your third would be 4, and your fourth would be 8, and so on. And your 30th step would take you to the moon. In fact, your 29th step would take you to the moon, and your 30th step would bring you all the way back. Every step in an exponential process is equivalent to the sum of all the previous steps. That is the power of exponential growth. And that is the power which is going to give us these two singularities. So I'll take each in turn. The technological singularity is more important. but the economic singularity is more urgent. So I'll start with the technological one. And this is what happens when we create a machine with all the cognitive abilities of an adult human. And because machines can be improved, whereas we can't, the machine will go on to become a superintelligence. And quite quickly, there'll be an entity on this planet many times smarter than the smartest human. Now, this may sound like science fiction, which is a great excuse to put up scenes from my 5 favorite science fiction Hollywood movies. But actually, there's 2 ways to do it, and at least one of them will almost certainly work. One of them is to carry on doing what we're doing. So the schematic at the top is a representation of a deep learning system. Deep learning on its own probably won't take us all the way to AGI. We're probably going to have to combine it with the earlier form of AI known as symbolic AI or good old-fashioned AI, and there may need to be some new breakthroughs. This involves blue sky science. This involves conceptual breakthroughs. So we don't know for sure that it can be done, and we certainly don't know how long it will take. But the biggest poll that's been done of AI researchers suggests that the median guess that they have about how long this will take is about 50 years. The other route almost certainly will work. This isn't blue sky science. This is just engineering. And this is reverse engineering the human brain, known as whole brain emulation. So what you do is you take an existing human brain and you slice it very thinly, and you scan all those slices down to the molecular level, and that enables you to form a very detailed connectome, the wiring diagram of the human brain, called the connectome by analogy with the genome. And if you do that with sufficient accuracy, you will have a machine, when you instantiate it in a machine, which does what brains do. And what brains do is they create minds. Unless there's some magic going on in the 3.5 pounds of gloop inside our skulls, this will work. And again, we don't know how long it will take, but again, the best guess is about 50 years. It's a very, very big project. I'd say it's just an engineering project, but it's a seriously big engineering project because there are 96 billion neurons inside each of our brains, and each of them is attached to another 1,000 or so neurons. We don't yet have computers that could host that. We don't yet have the scanning equipment that can do the scanning, but they are coming. Now, until fairly recently, I was one of a pretty small number of people who took any of these ideas at all seriously. But then in the end of 2014, we had what I call the 3 wise men moment, when first Stephen Hawking and then Elon Musk and then Bill Gates all said the same thing. They all said that strong AI, artificial general intelligence and superintelligence, is almost certainly coming. And when it does, it will either be the best thing or the worst thing ever to happen to humanity. And unfortunately, the journalists only heard the downside half of the story, and the result was lots of pictures of this guy all over the media. Now, it's not impossible that we might create Skynet, but we'd have to be very, very unlucky and very stupid. A more serious threat is that we create a superintelligence which is indifferent to us. So it doesn't love us and it doesn't hate us. It just thinks it has better uses for the atoms that we're made up of. And more likely than that is that we create an AI system which really does like us, but doesn't understand us all that well and misinterprets a request that we make. So we ask it to make us all happy and safe, and it says, well, I know how to do that. I'll put you all in coffins, I'll wire you up with heroin drips and keep you very safe and very happy. But that's not really what we meant. So the most important job for humanity this century, and probably ever, is to make sure that the very first superintelligence that arrives on this planet really likes humans and understands us better than we understand ourselves. And the good news is that there are 4 organizations, these organizations, which are already working on that problem. It's a big problem. It won't be easy to solve, but we've got quite a long time and we've made a start. You might think, very reasonably, that since this is so risky, we should press the pause button, known as relinquishment. Unfortunately, we cannot stop research into AI because increasingly having a better AI than your competitor means you win, whatever competition you're in, whether you're a government or a company or a military. So we can't press pause. And we shouldn't want to, because superintelligence can give us enormous benefits, almost incredible benefits. So DeepMind, that very clever company in North London, has this two-step mission statement for themselves and for humanity. Step one is to solve intelligence, create artificial general intelligence and superintelligence. And step two is to use that to solve everything else. And they really mean everything else: war, poverty, and death. So here's a truly startling, and it may seem to many of you a completely implausible suggestion. There may be people on this call who will not have to die. We can have an amazingly wonderful future if we get superintelligence right. Imagine a world in which not only you don't have to die, but you can rewind the years so you can become younger. You can have everything materially and non-materially that you want. You can travel around the universe as you like. So extraordinary stuff, but quite a long way off. What about the economic singularity? That is automation, which of course isn't new. We've had automation since before the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And the poster child is, of course, the agricultural industry, where in 1800, 80% of all humans working in America, all Americans worked on farms. In 1900, that number was down to 40%, and now it's down to about 1%. Now, that change was a real wrench, and a lot of people were greatly inconvenienced by it. There were deaths. But in the long run, it wasn't disastrous for humans. It didn't, the machines didn't steal all of our jobs, because that was mechanization. The machines took our muscle power, and we humans had something else up our sleeve. We had our cognitive abilities. So the grandchildren of those American farm laborers are now working in shops and offices around the world. But it didn't work out so well for the horse. The horse had fantastic muscle power, but once that was superseded, it had nothing else to offer. So 1915 was peak horse. There were 21.5 million horses working in America on farms and pulling vehicles, and now there are none. And the horse population of America today is about 2 million, which is very serious technological unemployment. Now we have a new form of automation. Cognitive automation is no longer mechanization. The machines are coming for our cognitive work, which we have seen before. So in this, in the blue marked states in this map, the most common job description in those states was secretary. And of course, they've all been automated by Microsoft Office. So that today, the most common job description in the green states is truck driver. Now, what happens to them when self-driving vehicles arrive? There's about 3 million truck drivers in America and another 2 million other professional drivers of vans and taxis and so on. And self-driving vehicles are probably going to be ready for prime time within the next 5 years, quite possibly well before that. And how long will it take to replace the existing population of vehicles with self-driving ones? Well, we don't know, but here's a prior example. These two pictures were shot on Easter Day in New York. The one in 1900 has a lot of horse-drawn vehicles. And this, I don't know if you can see the circle on the lower left-hand corner is one solitary motor car. In 1913, same location, lots of motor cars, one solitary horse-drawn vehicle. So in less than 15 years, the city of New York swapped out the type of vehicle. And that was at a time when technology adoption was considerably slower than it is today. So it seems to me quite likely that most professional drivers, most human professional drivers, are going to lose their job within the next 15 years or so. And it may not be a smooth process. We may see road rage against the machines. What will those drivers do? It's going to be a long time before machines can do most jobs, and until then, humans will still find jobs. But it might not be easy. Truck drivers might, you'd think, go and work in factories or warehouses or perhaps call centers, but of course automation will be striking there as well. And it is a myth to think that it is only relatively low-paid routine jobs which will be automated. There are already machines which carry out surgery better than human doctors. They're slow, they're expensive, and they're a bit buggy, but that will change. And lawyers are seeing a lot of automation already of their disclosure and discovery process. So it doesn't matter if you're a barrister or a barista, and it doesn't matter whether you're blue collar or white collar. The AI is colorblind. It will take the job of the white collar person just as much as the job of the person who makes that white collar. Because machines have unfair advantages. They don't sleep, they don't get cranky or drunk or tired or fall out with each other, and critically, they're getting twice as good every 18 months, and we're not. So I think we have to bite the bullet. I think we have to face the serious possibility that not in 5 years, not in 10 years, but very likely in 30 years, most humans will become unemployable because there won't be anything they can do for money that a robot can't do cheaper, better, and faster. This won't apply to everybody. For a long time, we're going to need people to make strategic decisions about organizations and about countries. And there'll be some jobs which are just too fiddly to be worth automating. Perhaps plumbers will be the last people standing. So that's the argument for technological unemployment. We don't know for sure that it's going to happen, but it seems quite plausible. But there's a lot of people who deny it. Certainly all the people running the tech giants deny it, and most politicians, if they give it any thought whatsoever, they mostly deny it. And sometimes you'll hear the argument that we've had automation many times in the past, and it hasn't created lasting widespread unemployment, and therefore it can't in the future, which is a foolish argument because it suggests that past performance is a guarantee of future outcome. And if that was true, we wouldn't be able to fly. The argument that the technological unemployment thesis is the Luddite fallacy is wrong. But that doesn't mean to say it's going to happen. What could happen is we all work in tandem with machines. Now, we do that already, and no doubt that will carry on. But the thing is, the machines are getting twice as good every 18 months, and we're not. And the maths of that are formidable. So in 10 years' time, the machines we have will be 128 times more powerful, broadly speaking, smarter than they are today. In 20 years' time, 8,000 times, and in 30 years, 1,000,000 times. That partnership between man and machine starts to look very stretched. So then people say, well, okay, machines will take most of our existing jobs, but they're not conscious, therefore they don't have empathy, so they can't do caring jobs. Well, that doesn't seem to be borne out by facts, partly because what humans offer in caring jobs is, generally speaking, a pretense of caring, and sometimes a genuine pretense. Machines can do that too. And Japan, which is at the sharp end of the greying of society and doesn't like immigration and is quite technophile, they're finding that elderly people really quite like being looked after by machines, perhaps because you can tell a machine the same joke 100 times a day and it just doesn't care. So the last line of defense is that we'll open a magic job drawer and all sorts of new jobs will fly out, and we can't tell you what they are yet because the technologies that will enable them haven't been invented. Now that might happen. I can't say for sure that it won't, but it seems a bit of a thin hope to me. I think the people who are in denial about the technological unemployment thesis are guilty of the reverse Luddite fallacy, and I think it's potentially dangerous, and I also think it's pessimistic because it requires all humans to do jobs forever, and that's a bit boring. Gallup did a poll a couple of years ago, major international poll, which revealed that 92% of humans don't really enjoy their jobs. I don't think anybody would be particularly surprised by that. Most people do their jobs to put food on the table. So it seems to me that we are heading towards a jobless world, and we better make the best of it. Of course, there are some challenges. The one that springs to people's minds immediately is meaning. What on earth will we do with ourselves if we don't have jobs? How will we find meaning in our lives? But there are two classes of people who I think prove you don't have to have a job to have meaning in your life. One is comfortably retired people, and the other is aristocrats. Aristocrats typically don't have jobs, and they don't all die of existential despair. The big problem is income. How do we provide enough income for everybody who doesn't have a job to have a very good standard of living? Now, some people think they've got the answer, and it's called universal basic income. But the trouble is all the ways that have been suggested to pay for it don't work. Soaking the rich, sacking all the bureaucrats who run the welfare state, and taxing robots are all, in their own way, bad ideas. But the biggest problem with the universal basic income is the word right in the middle of it. If the best we can do, if half the population or more is unemployable, is to give them a basic income, then we have failed morally and society probably won't survive. We have to do a lot better than that. And I think the answer is we have to have the economy of abundance, also known as the Star Trek economy, in which the prices of all the goods and services that you need for a very, very good standard of living have been driven down close to zero. Not entirely to zero, because the market is an extremely good mechanism for allocating resources, but close to zero, so that the taxes, which you have to levy, because there is no other way to do this, don't have to be punitive. Now, it sounds a bit crazy when you first hear it, but you can see it happening already in some parts of the economy. So when I was young, it was impossible, even for a rich person, to have access to all the music they might ever want to listen to. And now it's $10 a month, which is an extraordinary change. And it isn't just in digital, immaterial, weightless goods that this can apply. If you take transportation, remove the human driver, convert to electric, so there's many fewer moving parts, much less to go wrong, and critically make the energy source almost free, and solar cells are on an exponentially declining cost curve, and our storage and distribution technologies are getting much better. So it could happen in transportation, and it can happen across the economy, and I think it has to. And if it does, then we can have what people have been sort of looking forward to for a long time, that has never happened, which is the leisure society. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to do whatever you want any day, rather than having to turn up at the office? Now, there's another kink in the process, which is that there's very likely to be a panic, because well before we get to the economy of abundance, people are going to understand that technological unemployment really is coming. That's assuming it is. And when people panic, one of the things that they do is to vote for very nasty populist politicians who reassure them that everything will be okay. But their policies don't work, and they have to find external scapegoats, and then things turn very nasty. So we need to avoid this. And we avoid it by having a plan. We need a plan that will reassure everybody that we are heading towards the economy of abundance, and this is how we do it. So one of the top AI researchers in the world suggests that the way we develop that plan is we get a lot of science fiction writers, economists, psychologists, and all sorts of other people, lock them in a room and don't let them out until they've come up with the plan. And I think broadly speaking that's right, but not just one room. We need think tanks working on this problem all around the world. We need to develop the conventional wisdom that this is going to happen. Now, I could be completely wrong, and there's many other people who think the same way that I do. And if we are wrong, and we invest this money in think tanks, then we will waste a few £1,000,000, maybe a few tens of millions of pounds. And frankly, who cares? If we are right, and we don't make the investment, we're going to really regret it. So the exponential growth curve that we're on can give us extraordinarily wonderful futures, as long as we rise to the challenge. And here's where you come in, because although I have no idea who any of you are, you're all important people in your communities. And at the moment, our political leaders, our policymakers are not even beginning to think about this, with a very few honourable exceptions. We need to wake them up. It's very interesting that business people get this idea quite easily, and I think it's probably because they can tell that very powerful AI is coming into their organisations soon, whereas it's not necessarily into government. So we need to wake our governments up so that we can grasp the wonderful future that these two singularities can give us. I think it
thanks, Mr. Clark.
I think it offers
and
enormous
it was an
potential benefits.
enlightening
So I'm very
to
excited.
us for here. And thanks for the time spent here in GDMS2 also. Thank you very much for your activeness here in the pod. Thank you, sir.